Leonard Nimoy's first sexual encounter didn't happen where you might imagine. There was no girl in the next-door neighbor's window, and no magazine catalogs were involved. There wasn't even a glimpse of a matronly aunt's slip at a family dinner. In fact, Leonard Nimoy's first sexual encounter happened in one of the most unlikely of places. It happened at synagogue. The catch is, he didn't even know it at the time. He didn't even know it was a girl he was seeing.
The easiest way to tell the story is that when I was about, I think maybe 8 or 9 years old, high holiday services with my family, there comes a point in the service where the Kohanim, who are the members of the priestly tribe of the Hebrew people, get up to bless the congregation. And this was an Orthodox synagogue where the male and female are separate. The men sit typically in those days downstairs, and there's a balcony for the women. When these gentlemen get up to bless the congregation, the prayer that they're saying is in Hebrew. And they were loud, ecstatic shouters. It was almost like a revival meeting, a gospel kind of atmosphere. And my father said to me, "Don't look." And in fact, everybody had their hands over their eyes or their prayer shawls over their heads. But I was, I'm 8 years old and there's something really strange going on, so I peeked. And I saw them doing that with their hands as they were blessing the congregation, as they were shouting this prayer. It was kind of chilling. I had no idea. It seemed magical. It seemed very theatrical, certainly. And I was intrigued, and I started to practice to learn to be able to do that. And I don't know, I didn't have any intention for using it anyway. I was intrigued with the gesture.
What he didn't realize was that it was at that moment, that day in synagogue, that Leonard Nimoy met the Shekinah, the female face of God, who in many ways would change his life forever.
To me, art is about illumination. It is about finding interest in an idea and researching that idea in order to illuminate what the idea offers. And to a great extent, art, when you present it to a public, is a way of helping people to understand something about themselves. I grew up in Boston, in the inner city. It was a tenement neighborhood, 3- and 4-story walk-up brick buildings. We were 3 generations in one apartment. My grandparents, my parents, my brother, and I. As far as religion was concerned, we were not regular temple goers except on high holidays, the occasional holiday, and certainly the high holidays. We were very much aware that we were socially and culturally Jewish. This was the family camera. My first images were photographed with this camera and enlarged with this camera, and with about 20 cents worth of Kodak supplies. And I just became fascinated with the ability to create an image, something that you could hold, an object that you could hold in your hand, and there it is, something I shot this morning, and tonight I have the picture in my hand. I could hang it on my wall or give it to my family or whatever. That was the beginning.
Most people think they know the rest, how he became an actor, became famous as Spock on Star Trek, and introduced the Vulcan hand greeting. However, many people don't know about Leonard's work as a photographer, or how that hand greeting became something more. Leonard Nimoy brought this gesture from one world to another.
Once I introduced it into Star Trek, There were a lot of questions about it. People would ask me, what is it? Where did it come from? What does it mean? And for a long time at Star Trek conventions or whatever, when I would talk about it, I would say in public, I don't know why you're not supposed to look. My first guess was that you're not supposed to look because you're being blessed. And typically, if you're being blessed, you bow your head to take the blessing so as not to seem proud, to assume a posture of humility. And then I had this conversation with the rabbi where I asked him specifically about it. Is there some reason that I don't know? And he came up with this story about the Shekhinah. He said, the legend is that during that prayer, during that benediction, the Shekhinah, the feminine deity, comes into the sanctuary to bless the congregation. Being a deity, she gives off this radiance, this powerful, powerful light, which could be injurious if you see it, if you look at it. And that's why you cover your eyes and don't look, to protect yourself. So I was struck with that, and being a photographer, I thought it's about light. Photography is often about light. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do an essay on the subject of the light and the presence of the Shekhinah, this feminine aspect of God. That's the shape of the letter Shin in the Hebrew alphabet, which is the first letter in a number of key words in the language. It's the first letter in the word Shaddai, which is a name for God. It's the first letter in the word Shalom, which is the word for peace. It's the first letter in the word Shekhinah.
But if you're not supposed to look at the Shekhinah, how do you photograph it?
I went back to my negatives because I had done quite a bit of work with female figure. And I went back to the negatives to see what I had that would lend itself to this kind of spiritual connotation. And I began to introduce into some of those images, I began to introduce the shape of the letter Shin, to superimpose it on some of these images to see what that dynamic created. What's happening is a crossover between sensuality and religion. That's a provocative intersection. And my concept was, I will go out with my camera looking for the Shekhinah. I will try to create scenarios where I will find her, or I will happen upon places where she might be. And I worked with a lot of different models over a period of 7 or 8 years to develop the body of work that became the book called Shekhinah. I was due to speak about the book at a Jewish Federation dinner in Seattle. And one day, the agency that had booked me called me and said, we have a request. There are some nude photographs. And they ask you to eliminate any nudes out of your slides, which was not a problem because of the 30 or 40 slides that I was showing, there were images that I was showing, there were only 3 or 4 that were nudes. There was a lot of sensuality in a lot of the images, but only 3 or 4 nudes. A day or 2 later, she called me, the agent, and said, they've now asked you not to show the images at all on the screen. So I said, well, that's a serious problem because that's my reason for going, is to talk about the book, and the book is a book of photographs. And it would be silly to stand there and talk about photographs that I can't show. And we agreed to disagree, and I said, fine, then I won't come. And let it go at that.
But not everyone was willing to move on.
The newspaper, Seattle Times, I think it was, got hold of the story and ran a sizable piece about the fact that I had sort of been disinvited. The Associated Press picked up the story off the Seattle Times story and ran it nationwide. And suddenly the book was a hot seller as a result. So being banned in Seattle was useful, as it turned out, for the publisher. And then Saturday Night Live did a sketch about the fact that I had been censored in Seattle by the Federation. It just got to be kind of this amazing controversy over this subject.
Now, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that Leonard's book became such a big story. The question is, was it just controversy for controversy's sake? John Rossove is Leonard's rabbi. He's the one who first told Leonard about the Shekhinah.
If people are afraid of the showing of a nipple, and that this somehow shocks the American Jewish and perhaps some elements of the Israeli community as well, I say it is not ugly. Yes, it is erotic, and it can be beautiful. And Leonard took it as part of the form of the female figure that is the personification of the Shekhinah, feminine indwelling place of God. And from that perspective, I think the way he presented it is really quite beautiful and quite meaningful and inspiring.
To me, the book is a very strong feminist statement, and among other things. And I think to some degree, in the Orthodox community, that makes people uncomfortable with the idea that God is a woman.
I have to say, this is not a modern concept. If you read the Bahir and the Kabbalistic literature from the medieval period, these rabbis were right there. They were very erotically oriented. And if you go into a very Hasidic shul, I mean, there is ecstatic prayer going on that verges on the erotic. Hasidim, when they're davening, it's as though they're making love. So this is the controversy, I think, is a reflection of a puritanical Western American world that needs to get over itself.
Communities, religious communities, political communities, do tend to react somewhat fearfully. People look at a painting or a sculpture, and very often it helps them get in touch with something that they don't often get in touch with. That's what art is supposed to do for you. I still consider myself a good Jew, and I can see where some people would be sensitized to a degree and would find it difficult to look at these images. And I've done this presentation many times around the United States and Canada. And when I talk about it and I'm about to show the images, I say, look, if you think you're going to be offended or bothered by these images, I'll tell you what, do what my father told me, don't look. You know, I'm going to show them now, shut your eyes.